So admittedly, I already did the recording, right? I've already uploaded it. You'll see it. But I need more of this book than what I recorded, so I'm going to read a little bit more, and then we'll go from there. And I mess with the bar spoon. Well, I can't think because, you know what? I do that sometimes. Anyway. Scarlet. Chapter 23. I don't know why I paused. The world spun. Scarlet searched Wolf's face for a joke that never came. My father. I'm sorry, he murmured. I thought she must have told you something about this. But how do you know all this? It ties back to the princess. Evidence suggests she was taken off by a man named Logan Tanner, a doctor. Yo, hold up! Hold up! Hold the phone, and I've got a message. Somebody about this. Hang on. Evidence suggests he was taken off Luna by a man named Logan Tanner, a doctor. Did Dr. Arlund help smuggle Cinder? He can't have helped smuggle Cinder because he lost her. Maybe that's it, that he lost her, or otherwise, like, wasn't privy to her location or something. Might be a bit of a stretch. I don't think that's it. Possible, though, because he had to have smuggled onto Earth himself. No, but he said that he tried to smuggle his daughter. Maybe there was a switcheroo or something? I don't know. That theory doesn't hold up. Wait, I'm actually not a fan of that one. Never mind. It all ties back to the princess. Evidence suggests that she was taken off Luna by a man named Logan Tanner, a doctor. I'm reading too much into this, trying to find this symbolism. He searched her for some recognition, but the name meant nothing to Scarlet. Wolf continued. The only Earthens Dr. Tanner would have contact with prior to taking the princess were those who had been on the same mission as your grandmother. People who knew him suspected that Dr. Tanner had a liaison with Michelle Benoit during her stay. These theories became more plausible when we learned that Michelle had given birth to a son, with no record of the father, 9 months later. Wait! So, Scarlett's dad? What the fuck? Hold on. Wait. If I'm interpreting this right, it's believed that Scarlett's dad is the guy who took Princess Celine off the moon. What? Unable to stay standing, Scarlet sank to the ground. If Wolf was telling the truth, if these theories were correct, then her grandfather was Lunar. He's the moon man. He's a moon daddy. A flurry of thoughts passed before her. Clues she'd never known she was collecting settled into place. Why her grandma was so sympathetic to Lunars. Why she never talked about Scarlett's grandfather. Why she insisted that neither Scarlet nor her father be born in a hospital. The mandatory blood tests would have shown their ancestry. How could she have kept it a secret for so long? Don't eat nuts while you're reading an audiobook, because that's not... I'm going to ASMR about... I'm just one quick handful, I'm sorry, while I talk about... Because there's a lot of implications, and we have to talk about this before I keep reading this chapter. I'm going to eat these nuts, and then we're going to talk about them. Alright, welcome to Lunar Chronicles, chock full of nuts. Yeah. This is going to be gross, I'm sorry. I'm starving. Oh yeah. Nice little stuff right there. Nice and nutty. Okay. So Scarlett's dad, her grandfather, helped smuggle Cinder off the moon, right? This is really gross, but you know what? I'm doing it. The nuts got too good. So, So they're not related. The only connection between Cinder and Scarlet is that Scarlet's grandfather took Cinder off the moon. Levana was going to kill Cinder when she was a baby. Who was Logan Tanner? We know he's a doctor, but what significance does he have? Why was he the one chosen to take Cinder off the moon. Hold on. The earthen dignitaries that went, Michelle Benoit being the pilot, and I need to record this theory. I don't know if it's a theory, but Michelle Benoit was the pilot that the earthen dignitary for the earthen dignitaries that went to the moon. The first and seemingly only time in 50 years. So was it planned beforehand, and the earthen people knew that they were going to smuggle? They had to have known. It couldn't have been a secret, unless Logan Tanner was able to talk to Michelle Benoit and convince her to get the baby off the moon. And then also put a baby in her at the same time. Like, hey, here's a free kid. Oh, here's another one for you, but this one has to bake for a few months. I don't get that. I don't. But yeah, no, that makes sense why Granny Benoit wouldn't have wanted any of them to be born in the hospital, because they would show that they were lunar and that they were fugitives and that they needed to go back to the moon to be killed. So it had to have been a conspiracy from the start, whether by individuals or person or persons unknown, or by maybe the International Council or something. But it had to have been known by somebody on Earth that they would be taking Princess Celine. But who? And why? Well, I guess because did they know at the time that Levana was going to become a tyrant? Unlikely, but possible? I don't know. I don't know. The more we find out, the less we know. Okay. How could you, see now, because I had a mouthful of nuts. Mouthful of nuts. It dries your throat out. Anyway, how could she have kept it secret for so long? It occurred to her with a jolt that it was always her grandmother's intention to keep it a secret. She had never meant to tell Scarlett the truth to begin with. Something so big, something so important, and her grandma had kept it from her. We don't keep secrets, she whispered to herself, head sinking as tears started to well in her eyes again. We don't keep secrets from each other. I'm sorry, said Wolf, kneeling before her. I thought for sure you would have known about this. I didn't. She rubbed the tears away. Why wouldn't her grandmother have told her about this Logan Tanner? Was it to protect her from the distrust and prejudice that would come from being part lunar? Or was there something else, an even more unlikely secret she'd been protecting? Probably something else. Her chest ached as she wondered how many secrets had been kept from her. Wolf's attention darted to the south, one ear cocked to the sky. Instantly, Scarlett's thoughts settled. She listened, but there was only a breeze in the forest, a charming chorus of crickets. Though she heard nothing, Wolf whispered, "A train is coming." He fixated on her again. Concern etched across his brow. She could see that he believed he'd said too much, but she thirsted for more. With a nod, she planted a hand on the ground and pushed herself to standing. These people think my grandmother knows something about the princess because... Wolf skirted to the edge of the short cliff, peering off down the rails. They believe Dr. Tanner asked your grandmother for assistance when he brought the princess to Earth. They believe, but they can't know for sure. Perhaps not, but that's why they took her, he said, testing the fallen log with his foot again, to see what she knew. And did they ever consider that maybe she doesn't know anything? They're convinced that she does, or at least they were when I left them, though I don't know what they've learned since. Well, why don't they find this Dr. Tanner and ask him? Wolf clenched his jaw. Because she's dead. Stooping, he grabbed their forgotten pack and draped it over his elbow. He killed himself earlier this year in an insane asylum in the Eastern Commonwealth. Some of Scarlett's anger fizzled out. replaced with pity for a man who had not existed to her minutes before.
An asylum?
He was a patient there. Self-admitted.
How? He was Lunar. Why wasn't he captured and sent back to Luna?
He must have figured out how to blend in with Earth and society.
Wolf held out his hand, and Scarlet took it instinctively, starting when his hot fingers enclosed hers. After a heartbeat, his hold relaxed as they stepped out onto the tree trunk. Scarlet angled her port screen toward the treacherous footings and struggled to find her train of thought over the pounding in her ears.
There must be someone else he had contact with on Earth. The trail can't end with my grandma. According to my dad, she hadn't told him anything after weeks of who knows what they've been doing to her. They must realize they've got the wrong person.
There was a peculiar restraint when Wolf responded.
Are you sure they have?
She glared. The lunar heir was a myth, a conspiracy, a legend. How could her diligent, proud grandmother living in this small town Rio possibly be involved? But she couldn't be entirely sure of anything anymore, not if her grandmother had kept something so big from her already. A faint hum cut through the forest's whispers, the magnets waking up. A squeeze of her fingers sent a shock up Scarlet's spine.
Scarlet, said Wolf. It's in her best interest, and yours, to give them something. Please, think, if you know anything at all. I'm sorry I burped, Scarlet.
It's okay. It's gross, but apologize.
I'm sorry. If you know anything at all, we may be able to use it to our advantage.
About Princess Celine?
He nodded.
I don't know anything.
Scarlet shrugged, helpless.
I don't know anything.
She felt captured beneath the stare until, with a deep frown, he released her. His hand slipped away, hanging at his sides.
It's all right. We'll figure out something else.
Scarlet knew he was wrong. It wasn't all right. These monsters were chasing a ghost, and her grandma was caught in the middle of it. All because of some fling that allegedly happened 40 years ago. And there was nothing Scarlet could do. She glanced down. Her stomach flipped at seeing how high up they were. They were encroaching. With the encroaching darkness, it felt like she was standing at the edge of an abyss.
We have maybe 30 seconds, said Wolf. Once it's here, we'll need to act fast. No hesitation. Can you do that?
Scarlet tried to wet her parched tongue, but it was as dry as the crackled bark beneath her. She tried to calm her heartbeat. Seconds were counting off in her head, going by too fast. The magnets were growing louder. She heard the whistle of air down the tracks.
You're going to let me jump on my own this time?
She asked, spotting a bright glow around the nearest bend. Lights blared across the treetops, echoing endlessly through the gathered trunks. Treetops, and then trunks. The magnets directly beneath them crackled.
Do you want to jump on your own?
He set the bag between them. Scarlet studied the tracks, imagining a racing train beneath them. Subtle vibrations tickled her feet. Her knees seized up. She tossed the port screen into the bag and stepped onto a knot that protruded from the trunk.
Turn around.
He started to grin, but there was still a crease between his eyebrows, a lingering distraction. He let her climb onto his back, hitching her legs up higher until she had a firm grip around him. Tying her arms around Wolf's shoulders, it occurred to Scarlet that she had every right to despise him. He'd had the chance to rescue her grandmother, but he'd run away instead. He lied to her and kept those enormous secrets that she had every right to know. But that didn't change the fact that he was still here, still risking his life and facing his own tormentors to help her, still taking her to find her grandmother. Biting her lip, she leaned forward.
I'm glad you told me everything.
His body seemed to deflate beneath her.
I should have told you sooner.
Yes, you should have. She tilted her head, temple to temple.
But I still don't despise you.
She swept a kiss against his cheek and felt his body lock up. His heartbeat thundered against her wrist as she clasped her hands together. The train rounded the corner, smooth as a snake. Its glossy white body rushed toward them, the vacuum creating a gust of wind that buffeted the trees to either side of the gully. Peeling her head off Wolf's shoulder, Scarlet glanced aside at him, noticed yet another scar, this one on his neck. Unlike the others, it was small and perfectly straight, more the work of a scalpel than a brawl. Something to do with his wolfish tendencies. Who knows? Who knows? When Wolf was crouching, then Wolf was crouching, and her heart jumped, tearing her attention back to the train. Wolf braced his hands on the bag. His muscles were still rigid, his pulse galloping, and she couldn't help but contrast it with the uncanny calm he'd had when they'd jumped out of the train window before. Then the train was beneath them, shaking the log and rattling Scarlet's teeth. Wolf shoved the bag off the trunk and leaped, digging her nails into Wolf's shirt. Scarlet clenched her jaw against a scream. They landed heavily on the glass-smooth roof, the levitating train barely dipping from the impact, and Scarlet felt it instantly. The wrongness. Wolf slipped, his shoulders tilting too heavy to the left, his balance rocking beneath her weight. Scarlet cried out, the momentum of the jump sending her spinning away from him toward the ledge. She dug her fingernails into his shoulders, but his shirt ripped out from beneath her, and then she was falling, the world tumbling around her. A hand gripped her wrist. Her fall stopped with the painful yank on her shoulder. She screamed, thrashing her feet as the ground whipped by beneath her. Blinded by the wind thrown in her face, she flailed her free hand up toward him and grasped onto his forearm, squeezing as desperately as she could with slick fingers. She heard his grunt, bordering on a roar, and felt herself being hauled up. She beat her feet against the train's sides, struggling for any traction before she was heaved onto the roof. Wolf rolled her away from the edge, landing on top of her. His hands hastily brushed the curls from her face, gripped her shoulders, rubbed her bruised wrist, every ounce of his frenetic energy devoted to checking that she was there, that she was all right.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I lost focus. I slipped. I'm sorry. Scarlet, are you all right?
Her breath shuddered. The world slowly stopped spinning, but every nerve hummed with the rush of adrenaline. Every bit of her trembled down to her core. Gaping up at Wolf, she wrapped her fingers around his, stilling them.
I'm all right,
she panted, attempting a weary smile. He didn't return the look. His eyes were full of horror.
I may have pulled something in my shoulder, but...
She paused, noting a splotch of red on Wolf's bandage. He'd caught her with his injured arm, reopening the wound.
You're bleeding.
She reached for the bandage, but he caught her hand, gripping it almost too tight. Scarlet found herself pinned beneath his gaze, intense and terrified. He was breathing hard. She was still shaking. Couldn't stop shaking. Her mind emptied of everything but the gusting wind and how fragile Wolf looked in that heartbeat, like one movement could break him open.
I'm all right,
she assured him again, wrapping her free arm around his back and pulling him toward her until she could curl up beneath the shelter of his body, burying her head against his neck. She felt his gulp, then his arms were around her, crushing her against his chest. The train angled toward the west, the forest blurring on either side of them. It seemed ages before the adrenaline drained out of Scarlet's limbs, before she could breathe without her lungs hiccuping at the effort. Wolf's embrace never relaxed, the sensation of his breath against her ear the only proof that he was living flesh, not stone. When finally she stopped trembling, Scarlet peeled herself away from him. The vice of his arms reluctantly let her go, and she dared to meet his gaze again. The shocked horror had left him, replaced with heat and longing and uncertainty. And fear. So much fear. But she didn't think it had anything to do with her nearly falling off the train. Lips tingling, she arched her neck toward him. But then she was pulling away from her, the space between them filling with harsh, cold wind.
We need to get down before we run into any tunnels, he said, his voice shaky and rough.
Scarlet sat up, heat rushing to her face, as she was struck with an almost irresistible yearning to crawl toward him, not to get off the train's roof, but to be wrapped up against him again, to feel warm and safe and content for just another moment. Aw, that's so sweet. She smashed the desire down into her gut. Wolf wasn't looking at her, and she knew he was right. They weren't safe up here. Not trusting herself to stand, she half slid, half crawled toward the front of the car, adjusting to the subtle movements of the train. Wolf hovered by her side, not touching her, but never too far to grab her should she get too close to the ledge. When they reached the end, Wolf swung himself down onto the platform between the cars. Scarlet peered down after him and spotted the bag at his feet. She'd all but forgotten it, but now a surprised laugh fell out of her. His aim had been perfect. As if she hadn't kissed him on the cheek right before his jump, and perhaps if she hadn't kissed his cheek right before the jump, his balance would have been too. Her nerves flustered at the thought, wondering if she had been the cause of his distraction. She sat down with her legs dangling over the side. "Show off," she said, reaching out and letting him catch her as she jumped down. His hands were achingly gentle as he lowered her to the platform, and and lingered a second too long after her feet were firmly planted, or not nearly enough. His expression had become haunted and confused, damn it, his brow tense. Without meeting her gaze, he grabbed the bag and disappeared into the car. Scarlet gaped at the doorway, waiting for the gusting wind to take down her temperature, burningly aware of the memory of his hands on her waist, her shoulders, her wrists. Her head was too full of the memory, too recent agony of wanting to kiss him. Slumping against the rail, she tucked her hair into the hood. She dimly tried to tell herself that it was a good thing Wolf had pulled away. She was always rushing into things without thinking them through, and it always got her into trouble. This was just one more example of her emotions carrying away, all over a guy she'd known for only... She strained to count back and realized, with some shock, they'd barely known each other for a day. Hey, when it hits, it hits. Only a day. Could that be right? Had that awful street fight happened just the night before? Had her father's fit in the hangar had only been that morning? But even knowing it, her feelings didn't change. Her skin didn't cool. The fantasy of being tucked in his arms didn't fade. She'd wanted to kiss him. She still did. She let out a sigh, and when her legs were solid again, ducked into the car. It was a storage car, wide open and stacked with plastic shipping crates. A square of moonlight fell in through the open doorway. Wolf had climbed onto a stack of crates and was busy shuffling them around to make more room. Scarlet climbed up to join him. Though the silence was painful, anything she could think to say sounded trite and artificial. Instead, she pulled a comb out of her bag and started picking the knots out of her wind-blown curls. Finally, Wolf stopped shifting crates and sat down beside her, legs folded, hands gripped in his lap, shoulders hunched, not touching her. Scarlet scrutinized him in the corner of her eye, tempted to close the gap between them, even just to rest her head on his shoulder. Instead, she reached out and traced a finger across the tattoo that she could make out in the dimness. He went rigid.
Was Ron telling the truth? Do you think they'll kill you for leaving them?
A momentary silence had her pulse pounding and her fingertip against his arm. A momentary silence had her pulse pounding and her fingertip against his arm.
"No," he said finally. "You don't have to worry about me."
She trailed her finger down a long scar that had once been a gash from wrist to elbow.
I'll stop worrying about them when this is all over. When we're all safely away from them.
His eyes flickered to hers, then down to the scar, and her fingers resting on his wrist.
What's this scar from? She asked. One of the fights?
His chest shifted, almost imperceptibly.
Stupidity.
Chewing her lip, she inched closer and grazed a fainter scar across his table.
How about this one?
He ducked back, forced to lift his head to pull away from her.
"That was a bad one,"
he said, but didn't elaborate. Scarlet hummed thoughtfully, then dragged her knuckle against the tiniest scar on his lip.
What about...
His hand snatched at her, stilling her caresses. His grip was not harsh, but unforgiving all the same. "Please, stop," he said, even as his gaze fell to her lips. Scarlet licked them instinctively, saw his eyes grow frantic.
What's wrong?
A heartbeat.
Wolf?
He didn't release her. Scarlet reached her other hand toward him, brushing her thumb over his knuckles. He sucked in a quick breath. Her fingers traveled up his arm, along the bandage and its spot of dried blood. He was taut as a bowstring, plastered against the wall. The fingers grasping her hands twitched. They're what I'm used to, he said, voice strained.
What do you mean?
She saw him gulp. No explanation came. Leaning forward, she found his jawline, the pronounced cheekbones, his hair, every bit as wild and soft to the touch as it had looked. Finally, he leaned his head into her touch, gently nuzzling her fingers.
It came from a fight, he murmured. Just another pointless fight. All of them.
His eyes lingered on her lips again. She hesitated. When he still didn't move, Scarlet leaned forward and kissed him. Softly, just once. Barely able to breathe around her hammering heart, Scarlet drew back enough for warm air to slip between them, and Wolf dissolved before her, a resigned sigh brushing against her mouth. Then he was pulling her toward him and bundling her up in his arms. Scarlet gasped as Wolf buried one hand into her mess of curls and kissed her back. I want to read that part again. I love this book. I love this series. Barely able to breathe around her hammering heart, Scarlet drew back enough for warm air to slip between them, and Wolf dissolved before her, a resigned sigh brushing against her mouth. Then he was pulling her toward him and bundling her up in his arms. Scarlet gasped as Wolf buried one hand into her mess of curls and kissed her back. That is so sweet. That's so sweet. Oh my god, my heart's melting. Oh my god. They've barely known each other for not even a day. Not even a day. They've known each other for not even a day. Not even a full 24 hours. Oh, I love this book. Oh, that was so sweet. He's rough and grizzled and just, I'm a lone wolf. And she's like, oh, what terrible scars you have. Just, oh my god. It's so good. It's so good. Like I need like a few minutes just to let my heart just recover. Oh my god. Oh, that was so good. Oh. Oh my god, that was so it's about lunars and cyborgs and trying to dispose of a queen. And that has got to be one of my favorite fucking like character couple interactions in literature. I loved that. That was great. Ah! I'm gonna need a mango. Book 3. Oh, grandmother, what terribly big teeth you have. Some mango. This is dried mango. Give me a second. I'll be right back. So typically, when I read these books, or any book for that matter, I'll read for a couple hours and then pause, because like, I need to make sure that my brain is getting rest. But every once in a while, a book comes across my desk, that I cannot put down. I do not want to stop reading until a book is done. And I consider it the highest honor, in my opinion, to have a book or series of books that you just cannot help but binge read. Almost like whether you watch, like, say, the Hunger Games or the Harry Potter movies or whatever, or anything like that. Twilight series, whatever it is. Any series of movies. Back to the Future. You watch one of the movies. You want to watch just your favorite parts or your favorite movie or whatever. But then you find that because you watched the one, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, whatever, you have to watch the whole thing in one sitting because you want to relive that story all over again. And I find that with this book series, I haven't even finished it. I'm on the second of like 6. But this book series is giving me that sort of enjoyment, that wonderment of what's going to happen next. What, if anything, might happen. That being said, we're continuing Scarlet. Book 3. Oh, grandmother, what terribly big teeth you have. Chapter 24. Hide. Cinder said the word slowly, tenderly, a breathy plea ending in a soft, careful D. Hide, Rampion, hide. Hide, Rampion. Disappear. Fade away. You do not exist. You cannot be seen. She was sitting cross-legged on her bunk in the dark, envisioning the ships that surrounded her. The steel walls, the churning engine, the screws and soldered seals that held everything together, the computer mainframe, the thick glass of the cockpit windows, the closed exit ramp in the cargo bay, the podship dock beneath her feet. Then she imagined it, invisible. Swimming past radars, and the radars remained silent, dissolving into blackness under the watchful eye of satellite stations. Gracefully dancing between all the other ships that cluttered the solar system, drawing no attention, not existing. Her vertebrae tingled, beginning at the top of her neck and running down to her tailbone. A warmth radiated outward, feeling every muscle and every joint seeping through her fingers and back into her knees, recirculating. She released the air from her lungs, let her muscles release with her breath, and started the chant again. Hide, Rampion. Hide. Hide. Is it working? Her eyes popped open. In the darkness, all she could see were pinpoints of stars beyond her window. They were on the side of Earth opposite from the sun, leaving the ship cloaked in shadow and the vastness of space. Cloaked. Hiding. Invisible. Good question, she said, turning her attention up toward the ceiling as she had already become habit, even though she knew it was ridiculous. Aiko was not some spot on the ceiling. Was not even the speakers that protected her chipper voice. She was every computer wire, every chip, every system. She was everything but the steel and bolts holding the ship together. A little water. It was a little disconcerting. Oh, so that was Aiko saying, "Is it working?" It was a little disconcerting. I have no idea what I'm doing, Cinder said. She glanced out the window. There were no ships visible through the small portal. Only stars and stars and stars. In the distance, a vague purple haze, perhaps some gas left off the tail of a comet. Do you feel any different? Something rumbled beneath her feet, soft as a kitten's purr. It reminded her of the way Aiko's fan used to spin extra fast when she was processing information. No, said Aiko after a minute, then the thrumming died down. Still gargantuan. Cinder untucked her legs, allowing blood back into her foot. That's what worries me. I feel like it shouldn't be this easy. The entire Commonwealth's military is after us. For all we know, they could have elicited the help of other Union militaries by this point, too. Not to mention lunars and bounty hunters. How many ships have you picked up on our radars? 71! Right. And not one of them noticed us or got suspicious? Does that seem possible?
Maybe what you're doing is working after all. Maybe you're a natural at this lunar thing.
Cinder shook her head, forgetting that Aiko couldn't see her. She wanted to believe she was having an effect, but it felt wrong. Lunars had control over bioelectricity, not radio waves. She had a suspicious feeling that all this chanting and visualizing was an enormous waste of time. Which left the question, why hadn't they been spotted yet?
Cinder, how long will I have to stay like this?
Cinder sighed.
I don't know, until we can install another auto-control system. And until you find me a new body.
That too. She rubbed her hands together. The subtle warmth that filled her right fingers had faded, and for once they were colder than the hard metal ones.
I don't like being a ship. It's awful.
There was a distinct whine in Aiko's tone.
It makes me feel less alive than ever.
Falling back on her cot, Cinder studied the black shadows of the bunk. She knew exactly how Aiko felt. For the brief time she'd been acting as the auto-control system herself, it had seemed like her brain was being stretched in every direction, like she'd lost touch with her physical body, had detached her brain and was hovering in a non-existent space between the real life and the digital. Pity welled up in her for Aiko, who had never wanted anything but to become more human.
It's all so temporary,
she said, pushing the hair off her forehead.
As soon as we get safe back to Earth, we'll...
Hey, Cinder, are you watching the net? Thorn crowded into the doorway, outlined by the energy-saving lights in the hallway. What's this? Nap time? Turn some lights on. Cinder's muscles nodded across her shoulders.
Can't you see I'm busy?
Thorn surveyed the small, dark room. Yeah, good one. Throwing her feet off the bed, Cinder sat up.
I'm trying to concentrate.
Well, keep up the good work, mate. In the meantime, you should come watch this. They're talking about us on all the channels. We're famous.
No, thank you. I'd rather not see myself acting like a maniac at the most important social event of the year.
She'd only watched the footage from the ball once, of when she'd lost her foot and crashed down the stairs, landing in a heap of wrinkled silk and muddied gloves. And that one viewing had been plenty. Thorn waved his hand. They've already showed the clips, and now you've achieved the dream of every red-blooded girl under the age of 25.
Right. My life is a real dream come true.
Thorn wiggled his eyebrow. Maybe not, but at least Dreamy Prince Kai knows your name.
Emperor Kai,
she said, frowning at him. Precisely! Thorn cocked his head toward the front of the ship. They're starting a press conference to talk about you. Thought you wouldn't want to miss. Thorn fanned himself, swooning. His heavenly chocolate brown eyes and perfect tousled hair, and Cinder sprang off the bed, shoving Thorn into the doorframe as she marched past him. Ow! He said, rubbing his arm. What's got your wires crossed?
I'm adjusting the channel now.
Aiko's voice followed Cinder through the... Oh, no. She would be more supportive than that.
I'm adjusting the channel now. No, I'm adjusting the channel now.
Whatever. No, she would say,
I'm adjusting the channel now.
No, I'm adjusting the channel now.
I'm adjusting the channel now.
Aiko's voice followed Cinder through the cargo bay and into the cockpit, where the main screen was showing Emperor Kai at a podium before an audience of journalists. The conference is just starting, and he looks so handsome today. Thanks, Aiko, said Cinder, claiming the pilot seat. Hey, that's my... She silenced Thorn with a wave and adjusted the screen's volume. Thing we can to find the escaped convicts, Kai was saying. The circles beneath his eyes suggested that it had been a long time since he'd experienced a proper night's rest. Nevertheless, seeing him made Cinder both warm with longing and miserable when she thought of the last few moments she'd seen him. Her, having just tripped on the garden steps and lying sprawled on the gravel pathway with her wires sparking out of her ankle. He, disgusted, baffled, disappointed, betrayed. We've deployed our fastest ships with the most advanced... No, that's Thorn. Thorn was sneaking his way in there. We've deployed our fastest ships with the most advanced search technology and the best pilots in order to track down the fugitives. They've been lucky in their evasion of us so far, but we don't expect that luck to last. The class of ship they're inhabiting is not meant for extended periods of orbit. Eventually, they will have to return to Earth, and we'll be ready for them.
What kind of ship are they on?
No.
What kind of ship are they on?
asked a lady in the front row. Kai checked his notes. It's a stolen military cargo ship from the American Republic. 214 Rampion, class 11.3. Its tracking device has been stripped, which is largely responsible for the difficulties we've had in apprehending them. Thorn proudly poked Cinder in the back. On the screen, Kai nodded at another journalist at the back.
You said our military would be waiting for them when they return to Earth. How do you suspect that to be, and are you abandoning the space search in the meantime?
Absolutely not. Our primary objective is to find them as soon as possible, and we plan to continue the search in space until they are found. However, my experts project the ship will be returning to Earth any time from 2 days to 2 weeks, depending on their fuel and power reserves, and we will be prepared for that return if necessary. Yes?
My sources tell me that this cyborg, Lynn Cinder...
That's you, Thorn whispered with another jab. She batted him away.
Was given a VIP invitation to the annual ball and was in fact an invited guest of yours, Your Majesty. Do you refute that claim?
A what? Thorn asked.
VIP invitation, said Aiko.
Cinder scrunched up her shoulders, ignoring them both. On the screen, Kai shifted back from the podium, arms fully extended as if he were to give himself space to breathe, before clearing his throat and nearing the mic again. I do not refute the claim. I met Lynn Cinder 2 weeks prior to the ball. As many of you know, she was a renowned mechanic here in the city, and I had hired her to fix a malfunctioning android. And yes, I did invite her to the ball as a personal guest.
What?
Cinder flinched from the shriek that pierced through the cockpit speakers.
When did this happen? It had better have happened after Audrey dismantled me, because if he asked her to the ball and you didn't tell me... Aiko, I'm trying to listen.
Cinder squirmed in her seat. Kai had asked her to the ball before Aiko's body had been broken apart and sold off. Cinder had had the chance to tell her, but at the time she had been determined not to accept the invitation, so it hadn't seemed that important. When Kai called on another journalist, Cinder realized she'd missed an entire question.
Did you know she was a cyborg?
Asked a woman in an unhidden tone of disgust. Oh, so that would be more like, did you know she was a cyborg? Kai stared at her, appearing confused, then let his gaze dance over the crowd. He shuffled his feet closer to the podium, a wrinkle forming in the bridge of his nose. Cinder bit the inside of her cheek and braced herself for ardent disgust. Who would ever invite a cyborg to the ball? But instead, Kai said simply, I don't see that her being cyborg is relevant. Next question. Cinder's metal fingers jolted.
Your Majesty, did you know that she was lunar when you extended this invitation?
Looking like he might keel over from exhaustion, Kai shook his head. No, of course not. I, naively it seems, was under the impression that there were no lunars in the Commonwealth, other than our diplomatic guests here at the palace, of course. Now it's been brought to my attention how easy it is for them to blend in with the populace. We will be taking additional security measures to keep both lunars from emigrating here. To keep lunars from emigrating here, as well as find and export any that may be within our borders. I have every intention to comply with the statutes of the Interplanetary Agreement of 54 TE on this matter.
I'm sorry, I need water. Something's welling up.
Need some Tums. Yes, second row.
Regarding Her Majesty, Queen Lavanna, has she or any of the Lunar Court commented on the escape of the convict?
Kai's jaw tensed.
Oh, she had a thing or two to say about that.
Behind Kai, a government official cleared his throat. The irritation quickly evaporated from Kai's face, replaced with tactful vacancy. Queen Lavanna wants Lynn Cinder to be found, he amended, and brought to justice.
Your Majesty...
He wouldn't be on like my...
Your Majesty, do you think these events...
Is he hooey?
Do you think these events may have harmed the diplomatic proceedings between Earth and Luna?
I don't think they helped.
Your Majesty...
A man stood 3 rows back. Witness accounts from the ball seem to indicate that Lynn Cinder's arrest was part of an agreement between yourself and the Queen, and that letting her go would be cause for war. Is there reason to believe the cyborg's escape could lead to a greater threat to our national security?
Kai moved to scratch behind his ear, but caught the nervous tick and placed his hand back on the podium. The word war has been thrown around between Earth and Luna for generations. It is my prerogative, as it always was my father's, to avoid that at all costs. I assure you, I am doing everything in my power not to further unravel our fragile relationship with Luna, starting with finding Lynn Cinder. That's all. Thank you. He stepped off the stage to a wave of unanswered questions and was pulled into a whispered conversation with a group of officials. Pouting, Thorn slumped into the co-pilot seat.
He didn't mention me. Not once.
Me either, said Aiko without pity.
You're not an escaped convict.
True, but His Majesty and I met once, at the market. I felt like we really had a strong connection. Don't you think so, Cinder? The words slipped meaningly through Cinder's audio interface. She didn't respond, unable to tear her focus away from Kai. He was being forced to take responsibility for her actions. He was being unfairly faced with the repercussions of her decisions. In the aftermath of her escape, he alone had to deal with Queen Levana. Shutting her eyes against the sight of him, she rubbed her throbbing temple.
But I'm a wanted fugitive, like Cinder, Thorn continued. They do realize I'm missing, don't they?
Maybe they're grateful,
Cinder muttered. Thorn grumbled something incoherent, followed by a long silence, during which Cinder massaged her brow and tried to convince herself she'd done the right thing. Spinning, Thorn kicked his feet onto the armrest of Cinder's chair, nudging her elbow off it.
Now I understand why you've been so immune to my charms. I had no idea I was competing with an emperor. That's a tough hand to beat, even for me.
Oh, Thorn, you're a treasure.
She snorted. Don't be ridiculous. I hardly know him, and now he despises me.
Thorn laughed, hooking his thumbs in behind his belt loops.
I have great instincts when it comes to amore, and he does not despise you. Plus, he asked a cyborg to the ball? That takes guts. I generally dislike royalty and government officials on principle, but I have to give him credit for that.
Standing, Cinder shoved Thorn's feet off her chair, freeing her path to the door.
He didn't know I was a cyborg.
Thorn tilted his head as she passed.
He didn't?
Of course not, she said, marching out of the small cockpit.
But he knows you're cyborg now, and he still likes you.
That would be more.
But he knows you're cyborg now, and he still likes you.
She spun back to him, pointing toward the screen. You got that from a 10-minute conference in which he said he's doing everything in his power to hunt me down and turn me over for execution? Thorn smirked, in a terrible snotty voice that Cinder guessed was meant to be a Kai impression. He said,
I don't think that her being a cyborg is relevant.
Oh, that was hard to do because that was my Kai voice, which is my normal voice, combined with my Thorn voice, which is a lot more commanding, and then my Thorn voice doing an impression of a haughty impression of my regular voice. So trying to do a variation of your own voice and then make fun of your main voice, that was weird.
I don't see that her being a cyborg is relevant.
Oh, God, that hurts. Weird. I'm too many layers deep. Rolling her eyes, Cinder spun away.
Hey, come back!
Thorn's boots hit the ground behind her. I have something else to show you.
I'm busy.
I promise not to make fun of your boyfriend anymore.
He's not my boyfriend! It's about Michel Benoit. Cinder sucked down a slow breath and turned back around.
What?
Thorn hesitated, as if afraid to move in case he set her off again, before inclining his head toward the cockpit's dash behind him.
Come take a look at this.
Heaving a sigh, Cinder trudged back toward him. She settled her elbows on the back of Thorn's chair. Thorn dismissed the news channel.
Did you know that Michel Benoit has a teenage granddaughter?
No, said Cinder, bored.
Well, she does. Miss Scarlet Benoit. Supposedly, she just turned 18, but brace yourself, she doesn't have any hospital records. Get it? Holy spades, I'm a genius.
Cinder scowled. I don't get it. Tilting back, Thorn peered at her upside down.
She doesn't have any hospital records.
So?
She spun the chair to face her. Do you know a single person who wasn't born in a hospital?
Cinder considered. Are you suggesting that she could be the princess?
That's precisely what I'm suggesting.
The net screen turned to a profile and picture of Scarlett Benoit. She was pretty, with pronounced curves and fiery red curls. Cinder squinted at the image. A teenage girl without a birth record. A ward of Michelle Benoit. How convenient. Well then. Excellent detective work, Captain. Okay, alright. I didn't think about that. I did not 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 think about that. I did not. Oh my god. I didn't think about that because she wasn't born in a hospital because of the medical records, right? But the ages don't fit. The ages don't fit because she's 18. Cinder still fits because Scarlett's too old. But the assumption could be drawn. Wolf said that she wasn't born in a hospital because they would have detected her lunacy. Not lunacy. Lunar-cy. Because lunacy is being crazy. Okay. Alright. Okay, hang on. Thorn thinks that Scarlet might be the Lunar Princess. The ages don't necessarily fit, but it could be possible. But Dr. Erlon said that Cinder was Princess Celine. Maybe Dr. Erlon was mistaken? I don't think so. That doesn't sound right. I'm sorry. As of right now, we have to assume that Cinder is Princess Celine. That Dr. Erland was not mistaken. Until we're given reason to believe that he was mistaken. And we know that Scarlet can't be because she's not the daughter of Queen. Yeah, she's not the daughter of Queen Channery. Her direct. Well, we're assuming, right? No, because we're assuming that Scarlett's dad, Luke, is her real dad, but he has to be because who the fuck else would it be? No. The hereditary records show that it can't be any. No, Cinder is still Celine. This is a false assumption of Thorn. He's not wrong because he doesn't have the context that we do for reading this book. There's something there. There's something there. There's something there. Right, so they need to find Michelle. They're going to find Scarlet. She'll be easy to track. Or at least locate, I would think. And that's what's going to bring them to Paris. And then Cinder and Thorn meet up with the rest of the team. And then all together, do they go about this? Chapter 25. Scarlet dreamt that a blizzard had covered all of Europe in neck-deep snow. A child again, she came downstairs to find her grandmother kneeling in front of a wood stove. "I thought I'd found someone who would take you in," her grandma said. "But a French grandma? Bonjour. No, bonjour. Buongiorno. I thought I found someone who..." Hang on, how's the grandma gonna sound? Give me a second to think of this one. Because this grandma is a French grandma. I can't give her the French accent. I can't do French accents. Zottolo. I missed one. It's Italian. Okay. Slower paced and soft. "I thought I found someone who would take you in," her grandma said. But they'll never come for you in all this snow. I guess I'll have to wait until spring to be rid of you." I feel like her grandma would be spry, but also with a twinkle. "I guess I'll have to wait until spring now to be rid of you." She chuckles like Yoda, because why not? She stoked the fire. The sparks flew into Scarlet's eyes, stinging, and she woke up with wetness on her cheeks. Her fingers like ice. For a long time, she couldn't sort out what was a dream and what was a memory. Snow, but not so much snow. Her grandmother wanting to send her away, but not when she was a child, a teenager, 13. Had it been January, or later still in the winter? She struggled to piece together thawing memories. She'd been sent out to milk the cow, a chore she'd despised, and her hands were so numb she was afraid she would squeeze the udders too tight. Why hadn't she been in school that day? Was it a weekend? A vacation? Oh, right. She'd been visiting her father. Just come back the day before. She was supposed to stay with him for a full month, but she couldn't stand it. The drinking, the coming back to the apartment in the middle of the night. Scarlett had taken the train home without telling anyone, surprising her grandmother with her arrival. Rather than happy to see her, her grandmother had been angry that Scarlett hadn't come to tell her what was happening. They had a fight. Scarlett was still mad at her, milking the cow, fingers freezing. It was the last time she'd ridden the maglev, the last time she'd seen her father. She remembered hurrying through her chores, desperate to be finished with them so she could go inside and get warm. It wasn't until she was rushing back to the house that she saw the hover out front. She'd seen plenty of hovers when she lived in the city, but they were rare out in the country, where the farmers preferred larger, faster ships. She'd sneaked in through the back door and heard her grandmother in the kitchen, and a man, with their voices muffled. She inched her way around the staircase, her feet silent on the terracotta tiles. Okay, it says the man has an Eastern accent. Now, does that mean, like, Middle East? Or does that mean Asia? Asia. I can't imagine... I can't imagine what a burden she's been for you all these years. No. Oh. I can't imagine what a burden she's been for you all these years, said the man in an Eastern accent. Scarlet frowned, sensing the kitchen's warmth upon her cheeks as she peered through the cracked door. He was at the table, a mug in his hands. He had silk black hair and a long face. Scarlet had never seen him before. She hasn't been as much trouble as I expected her to be, said her grandmother, who she couldn't see. I've almost grown attached to her after all these years, but I must say, I'll be glad when she's gone. No more panicking each time an unfamiliar ship flies by. Scarlet's throat constricted. You said she'd be ready to go in a week's time. Can that be so? Logan seems to think so. This device of yours is all we're waiting for. If the procedure goes smoothly, it could even be sooner. But you'll have to be patient with her. She'll be quite weak, and more than a little bewildered. Understandably so. I can't imagine what it must be like for her. Scarlet clamped a palm over her mouth to smother her breathing. You have accommodations set up? Oh. That's the grandma. Oh, lady. You have accommodations set up? Yes, we're quite prepared. It will take some getting used to it for us as well, but I'm sure it will all work out once she's settled in. I have 2 girls of my own, about her age, 12 and 9. I'm sure they'll adore each other, and I will treat her as if she were my own. Ah! Oh, fuck, that's Lin May! That's Lin May, it's Lin May, that's Lin May. Oh, fuck, that's Lin May! Oh, my God! Okay. Tasty. Welcome to ASMR, where I just talk. Taxes are pretty high right now. Okay. Get out of my face. Logan seemed to think so. This device of yours is all we're waiting for. If the procedure goes smoothly, it could even be sooner, but you'll have to be patient with her. She's quite weak and more than a little bewildered. Understandably so. I can't imagine what this must be like for her. Scarlet clamped a palm over her mouth to smother her breathing. You have accommodations set up? Yes, we're quite prepared. It will take some getting used to, and for us as well, but I'm sure it will all work out when she's settled in. I have 2 girls of my own, about her age, 12 and 9. I'm sure they'll adore each other, and I will treat her as if she were my own. And what about Madame Lin? Is she prepared? Prepared? The man chuckled, but the sound was rough and uncomfortable. She could not have been more astounded when I brought up the idea of adopting a third girl. But she's a good mother. I'm sure... No, she's not!
No, she's fucking not!
I'm sorry she won't be able to come with me. Wasn't able to come with me, but I want to draw as little attention to this trip as possible. Of course, she doesn't know about the girl. Not everything. Not everything. Wait. Of course she doesn't know about the girl. Not everything. So what does Audrey know? And she let me try that again because I stuttered. She still treated Cinder like crap. I'm upset. Scarlet must have made a sound because the man suddenly looked up and saw her. He stiffened. Her grandmother's chair scratched against the floor and the door swung open. She was furious. Scarlet was furious right back at her. Scarlet, you know better than to eavesdrop. Go to your room. She wanted to scream, to stomp, to tell her that she couldn't just send her away like she was nothing. Not again. But the words wouldn't come. They were choked off at the base of her tongue. So she did as she was told, her feet pounding up the stairs and into her room before her grandma could see the tears. It wasn't only realizing that she wasn't wanted or that she could be passed off to any stranger that came for her. It was that, after 6 long years, she'd just begun to feel like she belonged. Like maybe her grandma loved her, more than her mother had, more than her father. Like maybe the two of them were a team. After that morning, she'd lived in fear for a week, 2 weeks, a month. But the man never came for her, and she and her grandmother never spoke of it again.
Scarlet.
The tightening of Wolf's arm around her waist dragged Scarlet back into the present, into a train car that was slowing down around her. She was curled up like a child with her back against him, and though her eyes were squeezed shut, a few hot tears escaped, rolled over the bridge of her nose, dripped across her temples. She hastily brushed them away. Wolf stirred and propped himself up behind her.
Scarlet?
His tone was nervous. I had a bad dream, she said, not wanting him to think the tears had anything to do with him. Already they were stopping and she rolled onto her back. It must have still been night for the darkness that took up the train car. But the unnatural glimmer of the city neon targeted the crates just inside the door, sending splashes of pink and green over the stacked boxes.
I remember something, she whispered. I think it might have to do with the princess.
He tensed.
I remember my grandma mentioning Logan now. She didn't want me to overhear. I was eavesdropping, and there was another man.
She told him the story as well as she could, piecing the memory back together again as her brain threatened to fog over. When she was done, she lay still, listening to the whistle of wind. Outside the train cars, her side was stiff from sleeping on the hard crate. Rather than look relieved or hopeful, Wolf peered down at her, terrified.
That's what they're looking for, isn't it? I mean, it must have been the princess they were talking about. I don't know where she was, or who was taking care of her. I never saw her. All the time I thought she'd been planning on sending me away, but now, after what you've told me about Logan Tanner and Granmere and Princess Celine...
Wolf pulled away from her, sitting up and curling his knees against his chest. He stared blankly at the stacks of crates surrounding them.
This man had an accent. The person portraying this book right now did not do a good job, but I believe he was from the Eastern Commonwealth.
And I believe I have a lisp for some reason instead of being French.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Scarlet pulled herself up beside him, combing her hair to one side.
Bonjour. And I'm pretty sure my grandma called his wife Madame Lynn? I don't know how common of a name it is, but I would recognize him if I saw him again. I'm sure I would.
Don't say that.
Don't say that.
Wolf pressed his hands over his ears.
I didn't hear that.
Scarlet blinked, stunned by his grimace.
Wolf?
Reaching forward, she tugged his hands down.
This is good, isn't it? They want information. I have information. We'll barter. We'll trade for my grandmother's safety. Isn't that...
Don't go.
His gaze trapped her in the darkness. Tousled hair, faint scars, flecks of sleep in his eyelashes. Wolf twisted a curl of her hair around his fingers.
Don't go looking for your grandmother.
A streak of orange light flashed the door and vanished.
I have to. No, Scarlet, you don't have to.
He grasped her hand, engulfed it in both of his.
There's nothing you can do for her. If you go, you'll only be putting yourself in danger. Would your grandmother want that?
Scarlet yanked her hand out of Wolf's grip.
We can run away,
He continued, his fingers scrambling for contact, knotting themselves around her pockets.
We'll disappear in the forest, go to Africa or the Commonwealth. We can survive and they'll never find us. I can keep you safe, Scarlet. I can protect you.
What are you talking about? Just last night you said that if I had any information that could help, it could be my grandma's only chance, and now I have information. I thought that's what you wanted.
Maybe, he said, maybe, if you had a full name, an address, something specific. But a last name and a country, an enormous country. And a description? Scarlet, if you tell them this, they'll only take you captive, in hopes that you'll be able to identify this man.
Tugging at her zipper, she studied him, how his eyes were more crazed with every breath he took.
Good. Then we'll offer to trade me for my grandmother.
He shrank back, shaking his head, but Scarlet was bolstered.
We'll go together. You can tell them you have information, but you'll only give it to them on the condition that they let you walk away free. And you could take my grandmother with you and...
Oh, fuck, hold up. No, that's Scarlet saying that.
And that you...
No, he is right, Heather.
And that you take...
Who the fuck is saying this? Yeah, okay.
We'll go together. You can tell them that you have information, but you'll only give it to them on the condition that they let you walk away free and that you take my grandmother with you, and they can have me.
Wolf shuddered.
Wolf, you have to promise me you'll take care of her. We don't know what kind of condition she'll be in. If she's hurt, you'll have to take care of her.
Her voice hitched, but there were no more tears. Her resolve was complete. Until...
What if she's already dead, Scarlet?
Dread settled in her stomach at the words she had refused to speak, for fear it could make them real. The train was still slowing, and Scarlet could make out the furious noise of the city, hovers and net screens and buzzers warning to stay off the tracks. It was the middle of night, but in the city there was never silence.
Do you think she is?
Her voice trembled, her heart throbbed as she waited for him to answer.
You think they've killed her?
Every moment wrapped around Scarlet's neck, strangling her until the only possible word from Wolf's lips had to be yes. Yes, she was dead. Yes, she was gone. They'd murdered her. These monsters had murdered her. Scarlet pressed her palms into the crate, trying to push through the plastic.
Say it!
No, he murmured, shoulders sinking.
No, I don't think they've killed her. Not yet.
Scarlet shivered with relief. She covered her face with both hands, dizzy with the hurricane of emotions.
Oh, thank the stars, she whispered. Thank you.
His tone hardened.
Don't thank me for telling the truth when it could be have been mercy to lie to you.
Mercy? To tell me she's dead? To break my heart?
Can't do a French answer.
Making you believe she was dead was the only chance I had to convince you not to go looking for her. We both know that. I should have lied.
The hum of the tracks deepened as the train crawled into a station. Voices yelled, machinery clanked and hissed.
It is not your decision to make,
she said, grabbing the port screen and checking their location. They'd made it to Paris. I have to go after her, but you don't have to come with me.
Scarlet. No, listen, I appreciate their help, how far you've brought me, but I can go on alone. Just tell me where to go and I'll find it myself.
Maybe I won't. Scarlet shoved the port into her pocket, anger burning her in her cheeks. But then when she met Wolf's gaze and saw not stubbornness but panic, his fingers curling and uncurling, again and again. She released her mounting resentment. Scooting toward Wolf, she cupped his face in her hands. He flinched, but didn't pull away.
They'll want this information, won't they?
His expression was stone.
Well, offer me as a trade. You and Grandmère can go somewhere safe, take care of each other, and when they let me go, I'll come find you. They can't keep me forever.
She smiled as warmly as she could and waited for him to return it. When she didn't, she rubbed her thumbs across his cheeks and kissed him, though he instantly pulled her against him. He didn't let the kiss linger.
There's no guarantee they'll let you go. When they're done with you, they might kill you. You're sacrificing your life for hers.
It's a chance I have to take. The train came to a steady stop and sank down onto the tracks. Wolf's eyes saddened.
I know. You'll do what you have to do.
Peeling her hands off his shoulders, he placed a sweet kiss against her wrist where the blood pulsed beneath her skin.
And so will I.
And so will I. Truly. And so will I. So what does it mean that and so will I? So he's not going to betray Scarlet. Well, but it's going to seem like betrayal to get her out of there to keep her safe. Because he doesn't want Scarlet to go or anything to happen to her. Because she doesn't know what the Wolfpack will do, but he does. He knows. He knows that it will be torture. He knows that she will die. And he will do what he has to do to keep her safe. Tensions are rising. This is going to be weird. Chapter 26. The underground platform was well lit and filled with androids and hovering cars ready to unload the train's cargo. Scarlet followed Wolf into the shadows of another freight train. They waited until an android turned away before crawling up onto the platform. Wolf grabbed her wrist and pulled her across the platform, ducking behind a cart loaded with crates. A moment later, Scarlet saw an android roll into the car she and Wolf had just abandoned, its blue light seeping out the back door.
Be ready to run when the train leaves,
Wolf said, adjusting the bag on his shoulder. Not seconds later, the train lifted up off the tracks and began gliding back into the tunnel. Scarlet sprang toward the tracks, only to find herself being pulled back by her hood. She let out a strangled cry and slammed back into Wolf. "What?" He placed a finger on her mouth. Scarlet glared and ripped her hood from his grasp. But then she heard it too. The hum of an approaching train. It was on the third track out and blew past them without any indication of slowing, vanishing into the darkness again as quickly as it had come. Wolf grinned.
Now we can go.
They reached the other platform without any further run-ins, spotted only by a middle-aged man who watched them curiously over his port. Scarlet checked her own port when they reached the street level. The city was quiet in the still of the morning. They were at the Gare de Lyon. Gare de Lyon? Baguette. Gare de Lyon. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I use baguette as a precursor. Anyway. Surrounded by avenues of shops and offices. Though Wolf tried to hide it, Scarlet could tell he was sniffing for something. All she could smell was city. Metal and asphalt, baking bread. Metal and asphalt and baking bread from a closed pastiere in the corner. Wolf headed northwest. The street was lined with imposing second-era Beaux Arts structures and flower boxes hanging from the stone-wrapped windows. An ornate clock tower stood in the distance, its face lit up and showing two broad-pointed hands and Roman numerals. Below it stood a digital screen that read 4:26 a.m. beside an ad for the newest model of house android. Hey, maybe a new body for Aiko. How far are we? Scarlet asks.
Not far. We can walk.
They turned left at the traffic circle. Wolf, a half step ahead of her, hunched over like he was barricading himself. Scarlet's gaze traveled down his arm, over the bandaged wound that no longer seemed to be bothering him, to his fidgeting fingers. She wanted to reach out to him,
but found it impossible. She tucked both of her hands into her hoodie's pockets instead.
Hold up. I just thought of something. And it's probably nothing. I'm almost guaranteed it's nothing, right? But in the story of Little Red Riding Hood, she goes to visit her grandma while holding a basket of confectionery treats. Depending on what story it is, sometimes it's treats, sometimes it's baked sweets, other times it's like in Family Guy, it was a Coors party ball and a bunch of alcohol and drugs. So you never know. What is the basket of treats in this story? Is it the information that she has? Because that's a high point of the story. Unless it's already been there and I'm just not realizing it. But I just thought about this because it says that she couldn't reach out to Wolf, and she just put her hands into her hoodie. Probably nothing, I don't know. There was an abyss opening up between them, cutting through whatever they'd shared on the train. They were almost there, almost to her grandmother, almost to the order of the pack. Maybe he was leading her to her death. Maybe Wolf was marching toward his. She tilted her chin up, refusing to frighten herself with her own morose thoughts. All that mattered now was rescuing her grandmother, and she was so close, so close. The ancient residences drew in closer to the road as they left the busy intersection behind. There was only the occasional sign of life, a cat cleaning itself in the window of a hat shop, a man in a suit darting from a hotel into a waiting hover. They passed a net screen that showed a commercial for a shampoo that claimed to change the color of one's hair based on their moods. Hey, that'd be cool. She already yearned for the solitude of the farm. That was the only reality she knew. The farm and her grandmother and her weekly deliveries, and now Wolf. That was the reality she wanted. Wolf quickened his pace, but his shoulders were squeezing inward again. Locking her jaw, Scarlet reached forward and grabbed his wrist.
I can't let you do this, she said, angrier than... I can't let you do this, she said, angrier than she had intended to. Just tell me where to go, and I'll go on by myself. Just tell me what to do. Give me some indication of what I'm dealing with, and I'll figure it out, but I can't let you go with me.
Sorry, Okay, so Little Red Riding Hood is bringing weapons and a mutant man to visit her grandma. I dig it. Give me some. See. He stared down at her for a long moment, and she tried to see softness in his stark green eyes. But the warmth and desperation that had been so apparent on the train were now replaced with a cold resolve. He pried his arm away.
Do you see the man sitting in front of the closed cafe on the other side of the street?
She slid her attention off him and found the man sitting at one of the outdoor tables. One ankle was propped up on his knee, his elbow dangling off the back of the chair. He was staring at them, and he didn't try to hide it. When Scarlet caught his eye, he winked. A chill crawled over her skin.
Pack member, said Wolf. We passed another at the mag rail station 2 blocks back.
Oh, that was the fucking old man.
And, he craned his head, if the stench is any indication, we're about to cross paths with another when we turn this next corner.
His heart was suddenly stopping.
How did they know we were here?
How did they know we were here?
I don't know.
How did they know we were here?
I suspect they've been waiting for us. They've probably been checking your ID.
That's what people did when they ran away and didn't want to be found. They cut out their ID chips. Oh no, okay, hold up. I'm fucking this up. I'm getting the order right.
How did they know we were here?
Yeah.
How did they know we were here?
I suspect they've been waiting for us. They've probably been tracking your ID.
Or yours, she murmured. If they do have access to an ID tracker, then maybe they've been following you.
Maybe. His voice was nonchalant, and she realized this wasn't news to him. Had he thought this could be possible? Was that how Ran had found them?
We might as well go find out what they want.
Wolf turned away, and she had to race to keep up with him.
But there's only 3 of them. You can fight 3 of them, can't you? You said you could take...
She hesitated. Wolf had told her he would win in a fight against 6 wolves. When had those wild animals become synonymous with these men? This order of the pack?
You could still get away. There's still a chance, she finished.
I said I would protect you, and that's what I'm going to do. It's pointless to discuss this any further.
I don't need your protection.
Yes, he said, the word biting over the synthesized noise of a music video on a nearby billboard. Yes, you do. Scarlet darted in front of him, planting her feet. He stopped just shy of plowing into her.
No, she said. What I need is to know that I'm not responsible for whatever they'll do to you. You need to stop being stupid and get out of here. At least give yourself a chance.
He peered over her head at some place in the distance. Scarlet tensed, wondering if he'd picked up on the presence of a 4th pack member, or even more. Gulping, she glanced at the man by the cafe, who was stroking his ear and watching them with obvious amusement. What's stupid is not that I'm going to try and protect you, Wolf said, pulling his focus back down to her. What's stupid is that I almost believe I will make a difference. Whoa, hold the fucking phone, yo. No, we're not letting that by. That was a holy shit. What the fuck's,
What's stupid is not that I'm going to try and protect you. What's stupid is that I almost believe it will make a difference.
Now that's some weight. That's some weight. That's some weight. That's some fucking weight. I don't know. It says now suddenly I'm a lot less confident in how this is gonna go. Like at first I felt pretty good about how this was gonna shake down, but now I'm not feeling too hot about this, man. He stepped around. Fuck. He stepped around her, shrugging off the hand that reached out to stop him. Her thoughts teetered, knowing she had a choice. She could run away with him, leave the city, and never come back. She could choose not to go in search of her grandmother after all, and maybe save his life. But it was not really a choice. She barely knew him. Despite the ache in her heart, despite everything, she would never be able to live with herself, knowing that she'd abandoned her grandmother when she was this close. She turned back only once, as they were rounding a corner, and saw that the man by the cafe was gone. A block later, the memory of the 4th World War caught up to them all at once. The scorch marks and crumbling facades of a city pummeled by war. There weren't enough of the beautiful old buildings left to draw in the interest of the conservationists, and the sheer amount of destruction may have been too overwhelming for reconstruction. Unable to demolish the city's history, the government had left this quarter alone. The districts, though separated by only a few streets, seemed worlds apart. With a gasp, Scarlet recognized the massive building stretching along the opposite side of the street, with its shattered arched windows and statues of men in old-fashioned clothing, many of them with broken limbs and some alcoves missing their statues altogether. The Musée du Louvre. One of the few sites her father had taken to as a child. The building, half collapsed on the west end, was too unstable to go inside, but she and her father had stood on the sidewalk while he told her about the priceless artworks that had been destroyed in the bombings, or the lucky few that had become spoils of war. Many had still not been found, over a century later. It was one of the few pleasant memories she had of her father. She'd forgotten it until now.
Scarlet.
She snapped her head around.
This way.
Wolf angled his head toward another street. She nodded and followed him without looking back. Despite the district's tarnish, it was clear that these ancient streets weren't entirely abandoned. A small motel advertised, Come stay the night with the ghosts of fallen civilians in the window. A thrift store displayed headless mannequins garbed in a rush of vibrant fabrics. At an intersection, Wolf paused on a concrete city square with a boarded-up entrance to the subway and a sign that indicated the platform was closed. The nearest could be found on the Boulevard des Italiens.
Are you ready?
Hold up. Okay, are they going into the Boulevard des Italiens? I'm imagining Italian wolves now. Hey, Baba the Boop, you kidnapped your grandma. Hey, buongiorno, your grandmare, she's over there. I don't know why suddenly they're gimps or whatever the fucking voice is I'm giving them. Salute! Your grandmother. She's over there, dead in the ditch. I'm so sorry. Anyway. Pasta! Anyway. You form the angel's nest. You got to be very careful the way you twisted the spaghetti. I don't fuck. I'm just gonna shut up.
Are you ready?
What the fuck was what kind of that wasn't even the line I was supposed to be. No, that was the line I was supposed to read, but the way I said,
Are you ready? Go!
okay, I'm too excited. I'm too animated. Oh, something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. I'm just so excited for it.
Ready?
She followed his transfixed gaze up to a towering, gorgeous building before them. Angels and cherubim stood guard at massive arched doorways.
What is this?
Wolf followed her gaze.
Once it was an opera house and an architectural marvel. And then the work.
Oh no, hold up. Okay.
Once it was an opera house and an architectural marvel. Then the war came and it was converted into storage for artillery and eventually prisoners of war. Then, when no one else wanted it, we took over.
Scarlet frowned at that word. We.
Seems a little conspicuous for a secret street gang, don't you think?
Would you ever suspect something horrible was living inside?
When she didn't answer, he backed away, scrutinizing her as he approached the massive theater. Again, he asked,
Are you ready?
Catching her breath, she examined the carvings. Faces grim and beautiful, the chalky bursts of men staring down at her. A long balcony missing half its balusters. Clenching her jaw, she crossed the street and marched up the steps that spanned the length of the building, past the silent, unpreserved angels, beneath the shadowed portico.
I'm ready,
she said, eyeing the mess of graffiti across the doors.
Scarlet,
She turned to face him, surprised by the gruffness in his voice.
I'm sorry.
He was careful not to touch her as he passed. Her mouth went dry, warnings cluttering her head as Wolf pulled the nearest door open and stepped into the shadows. Did he just abandon her? Did he just abandon Scarlet? Did... I'm sorry. He just said, I'm sorry, and then went into the shadows and bounced. Like when a dad doesn't want to pay child support, homie just left without a trace. And now she's in this spooky ass Musée du Louvre. Spooky ass mausoleum. What? We're about to hit a climax point, and he bails. He fucking bailed. Oh, we're in for a good time. I'm looking forward to this. Chapter 27. The door thudded shut behind them. Scarlet found herself in the immense foyer of the opera house, almost pitch black but for warm, flickering candlelight beyond the arches. The lobby was full of silence and dust and chunks of broken marble along the floor. The dust clogged Scarlet's throat, and she struggled not to cough as she moved toward the light. Her footsteps were shockingly loud in the empty, hollow building as she passed between two massive columns. She gasped. The light was coming from one of the two statues that flanked a grand double staircase. It depicted two women draped in billowing fabric atop a pedestal, each holding aloft a bouquet of torches. Dozens of wax candles glowed and flickered, casting a haunting orange film over the lobby. The staircase, carved from red and white marble, was missing random balustrades, and a companion statue to the first was missing her head and the arm that once held her own candelabra. Scarlet's foot splashed into a puddle, and she drew back, first looking down at the broken marble floor, then up. 3 stories of balconies rose above, and in their center, where the light barely reached, was a painted ceiling with a square window in its center. The window, it seemed, had long been missing. Hugging herself, Scarlet turned back to Wolf. He lingered between the columns.
Maybe they're sleeping,
she said, attempting nonchalance. Wolf peeled himself out of the shadows and prowled toward the staircase. His body was as tense as the statues that watched them. Scarlet's gaze darted over the railings above, but she saw no movement, no sign of life, no garbage, no smell of food, no sound of talking or net screens. Even the sound of the streets had disappeared beyond the massive entry doors. She clenched her jaw, anger flaring up inside her at the sickening sensation of being trapped like a mouse to be preyed upon. Stomping past Wolf, she marched toward the stairs until her toes pressed against the first riser.
"Hello!" she yelled, craning her head. "You have visitors!"
Are you hiding, the student, under the floorboards? Since apparently my French woman sounds like a German. Her words echoed back to her, harsh and defiant. No sound. No alarm. Then, from the silence, a familiar chime. Scarlet jumped at that sound that echoed between the marble pillars, despite being muffled within her pocket. Heart racing, she pulled out the port screen just as the computerized voice began to speak. Com received for Mademoiselle Scarlett Benoit from Le Hospital Joseph Duching in Toulouse. Scarlet blinked. A hospital? And hand shaking, she pulled up the comm. 30 August 126 TE. This communication is to inform Scarlett Benoit of Rio, France, EF, that at 5:09 a.m. on 30 August 126, Luc Raoul Benoit of Paris, France, EF, was pronounced dead by on-staff medical practitioner ID 58279. Presumed cause of death, alcohol poisoning. Please respond within 24 hours if you would like an autopsy to be performed for the cost of 4,500 univs. With sympathies, the staff of Le Hospital Joseph Duking, Toulouse. Her dad just died. Oh, that fucking sucks. What a fucking thing to get. You're about to go save your grandma and your fucking dad dies? It's a fucking her fucking dad's dead. What a time for that message to come through. That fucking sucks. Confusion reigned, her heart thumping erratically. The message didn't want to compute. Her brain turning it over and over. She pictured him the last time she'd seen him, raving and tortured and afraid. How she'd screamed at him, told him she never wanted to see him again. How could he be dead? Only 24 hours later. Shouldn't she have received a comm when he'd been admitted into the hospital? Shouldn't there have been a warning? Swaying on her feet, she peered up at Wolf.
My dad's dead.
she said, her whisper barely filling the enormous space.
Alcohol poisoning.
His jaw flexed.
Are they sure about that?
His suspicion was slow to filter through her encroaching numbness.
You think they sent the calm by mistake?
A touch of sympathy flickered in his eyes.
No, Scarlet. But I do think he was in danger of something much worse than a fondness for drinking.
She didn't understand. He'd been tortured, but the burn marks wouldn't have killed him. The insanity wouldn't have killed him. Through the fog in her brain, a gentle caressing instinct told her to look up, so she did. Behind Wolf, framed by two pillars that held unlit sconces, was a man. He was willowy and lean, with wavy dark hair and near black eyes that burned in the candlelight. He would have had a pleasant smile if Scarlet hadn't been so startled by his presence, his silence, the fact that Wolf did not seem surprised he was there. Did not even bother to face him, though he undoubtedly felt him to. More terrifying was his clothing. He wore a crimson red coat that flared at his waist and had long, bell-shaped sleeves. What the fuck? Okay, first off. This dude hiding by pillars and shit. I don't know why, but I'm imagining when Jim Carrey was the Grinch and he was like held up in the corner of the mailroom. But a crimson red coat. He's a second level thaumaturge. He's a lunar. Is he the fucking guy in charge of this sect of the wolf pack? What the fuck? That flared at his waist and had long, bell-shaped sleeves. Gold-embroidered runes sparkled along the hems. It was almost like a child's costume, an imitation of the horrible lunar court. Fear thumped against Scarlet's ribcage. This was not a costume. This was the stuff of nightmares and horror stories told to keep children from misbehaving. A thaumaturge. A lunar thaumaturge. Hello! No, let's say he would not be fucking... No, we're not doing that. Hello! You have to do the man act. Hello! The man said in a voice as sweet and smooth as melted caramel. You must be Mademoiselle Benoit! She stumbled back onto the first step, catching the rail for balance. In front of her, Wolf dipped his eyes and turned around. The man acknowledged him with a polite nod. Alpha Kelsey, so glad you made it back safely. And if I am correct to understand the calm the lady just received, Beta Wind's task in Toulouse must be finished as well. It seems we will be a full pack again. Oh fuck, they killed her dad! Wolf clamped a fist to his chest and gave a slight bow.
I am glad to hear it, Master Jael.
Gulping, Scarlet pushed her hip into the rail.
No,
She said, finding her voice on the second try.
she brought me here to find my grandmother. She's not one of you anymore.
The man's smile was warm and understanding. I see. I'm sure you're quite eager to see your grandmother. I hope to reunite you shortly. They're gonna kill her! Oh my god, they're gonna kill her! Oh my god! Oh, they're gonna fucking kill her, dude! Oh! Oh, shit. When you say something ominous like I hope to reunite you, they're gonna kill her! Ah! Scarlet clenched her fists.
Where is she? If you've hurt her.
She is quite alive, I assure you. Oh, no, she's okay, she's fine, she's fine. I jumped at a ghost. She's alive, she's fine. Without any change in expression, he slid his attention back to Wolf. Tell me, Alpha, were you able to meet your objectives? Wolf lowered his hand to his side. Obedience hung from him like a thin, absurd disguise. A headache pounded at Scarlet's temples. Her nerves hummed as she waited, hoping and wishing he was going to tell this man that he'd left their ridiculous pack, and he was never coming back. But the hope couldn't be entertained for long. It was being shucked off before Wolf even opened his mouth. This man was not a rebellious criminal, some member of a vigilante gang. If he was truly a thaumaturge, a real thaumaturge standing before her, then he worked for the Lunar Crown. And Wolf. What did that make Wolf?
I have questioned her to the best of my ability, Wolf said. She has a single vague memory, but I doubt both its usefulness and reliability. Time and stress seem to have had an effect on her recollections, and at this point I have no doubt she would create falsehoods if she believed they would benefit her grandmother.
The thaumaturge tilted his chin up, considering him. Alpha Kesley. Scarlet's heart hammered against her collarbone, ready to choke her. I have questioned her to the best of my ability.
Wolf.
He did not turn to her. He did not flinch or sigh or respond. He was a statue. He was a pawn. Wait a minute. He was a statue, he was a pawn. The thaumaturge is using the glamour on him to make him reveal shit. Because that's not Wolf right now. He's doing what he can. It's not Wolf. He's being possessed. The thaumaturge made a sad sound. No matter. Then after a silence in which Scarlet felt the stairs crumbling beneath her, he said, Omega Kelsey was to inform you that our objectives has changed. Her Majesty is no longer concerned with identifying Celine. Wolf's fingers twitched. Nevertheless, it has become clear to me that Madame Benoit has not yet given up all her secrets. Perhaps we can find another use for the Mademoiselle. Wolf's chin lifted, just slightly.
If she'd had any additional information, she would have told me. I am sure her trust was complete.
Scarlet half slumped onto the marble rail, grasping the base of the headless statue to keep from sinking to the ground. I'm sure you've done very well, said the thaumaturge. Don't be alarmed. I will see that your efforts are given proper recognition.
Who's better win? Said Scarlet. What was his task in Toulouse?
Her voice was weak, filled with disbelief as she teetered on the stairs. She struggled to believe this was all a nightmare. Soon she would wake up on the train in Wolf's arms, and all this would happen very differently. But she did not wake up, and the thaumaturge was eyeing her with dark, sympathetic eyes. Beethoven's task was to kill your father in a manner that would not raise suspicions, he said with no more reservation than if he were giving her the time of day. I did offer your father a chance. If he had found something useful on Madame Benoit's property, I think I truly would have considered letting him live, perhaps keeping him as a slave. But he failed in that. He failed in time. But he failed in the time we gave him, so I was forced to have him silenced. He knew too much about us, you see, and he had served his usefulness. I'm afraid we all have little tolerance for useless earthens. He grinned, the look twisting Scarlet's gut, not because it was a cruel smile, but because it was a kind one. You appear to be ill, mademoiselle. Perhaps you need to find some rest before you're fit to see your grandmother. Raif? Troya? Won't you see the lady to her prepared room? They emerged from the shadows, two men who were nothing but blurs in Scarlet's consciousness. They lifted her by her elbows, not bothering with ties or cuffs. Her mind flashed, and before she knew it, she was reaching for her waistband. Wolf's hand was there first, one arm brushing against her side. Her breath caught, and she was frozen. Staring wide-eyed into his face, his emerald eyes hollow as his fingers lifted the back of her sweatshirt and pulled out the gun. He was going to kill them. He was going to protect her. Flipping the gun around so that he gripped the barrel, Wolf held it out for one of her captors. When his severity melted, hinting at something like regret, Scarlet set her jaw.
A loyal soldier to the Order of the Pack?
Hey, it's your boy, OptimalTime. I'm recording this after the fact while I'm editing the video before I put it up because, despite how it looks, I actually do edit these things. Just as a heads up, I start screaming a lot in a second here because of the reveal. So it's super cool. A really freaking great book. I'm loving it so much. But I'm honestly just too lazy to peak down the audio. So just put your own volume down and then bounce back to it. when it's done, I'm having a lot of fun with this. I hope you guys are having a lot of fun with this. Just, watch your ears. That's all I'm saying. And if you're deaf, I don't want to make you more deaf. If you're, I don't know how to make, anyway, just bye. Have fun. It's about to play, so this is your last chance. So if you haven't done it yet already, okay, bye. She saw the pain in his gulp. No, Lunar Special Operative. The room spun. Lunar. He was Lunar. He worked for them. He worked for the Queen. Scarlet turned her head away and forced her legs to be strong. Refused to be carried away like a child as they guided her to another set of stairs. Stairs that led down to the Opera House's sublevels. She refused to give them the pleasure of a struggle. The thaumaturge's voice followed behind her, all benevolence. You'll have my leave to rest until sunset, Alpha Kesley. I can see that your trials have wearied you. It was all a ploy! Oh my God! No! Are you kidding me? The whole fucking time? The whole fucking time? Oh my God! Oh! Oh! Are you kidding me? The trials? The whole fucking thing? It was a test for him? I believed him! I believed him every step of the way! What? Wolf! My guy! What? How could you do this to me? We're friends! I trusted you! Chapter 28. Kai paced the length of his office, from door to desk, desk to door. 2 days had passed since Levana had issued her ultimatum. Find the cyborg girl, or she would attack. Time was running out, and every hour filled Kai with growing dread. He hadn't slept for 48 hours. With the exception of 5 press conferences in which he still had nothing new to report, he hadn't left his office in that time either. Still no sign of Lynn Cinder, no sign of Dr. Erlond. Like they'd simply vanished. Ah! He pulled his hands through his hair until his scalp stung. Lunars! The speaker on his desk hummed. Royal Nancy Android has requested entrance. Kai released his hair with a deflated groan. Nancy had been good to him the past few days, bringing vast amounts of tea and saying nothing when she took the still full, but now cold, cups back out hours later. She encouraged him to eat and reminded him when a press conference was coming up, or that he'd neglected to return the Australian Governor-General's comms. If it weren't for the title, Royal Android Nancy, he almost would have expected a human to walk through the doors every time she was summoned. He wondered if his father felt the same way towards his android assistants, or maybe Kai was just delirious. Shooting away the unhelpful thoughts, he rounded to the back of his desk. Yes, enter. The door opened and Nancy's treads rolled across the carpet. She was not carrying the tray of snacks he'd expected. Your Majesty, a woman by the name of Lynn Audrey and her daughter, Lynn Pearl, have requested an immediate appointment. Lin Ji says she has important information on the lunar fugitive. I encouraged her to contact Chairman Hui, but she insisted to speak with you directly. I scanned her ID, and she appears to be who she claims. I wasn't sure if I should turn her away. Thank you, Nancy. Send her in. Nancy rolled back out. Kai glanced at his shirt and buttoned the collar, but determined there was nothing he could do about the wrinkles. A moment later, 2 strangers entered his office. The first was a middle-aged woman with hair just beginning to gray, and the other was a teenage girl with thick hair that hung straight down her back. Kai frowned as the 2 bowed deeply before him, and it wasn't until the girl attempted a shy grin that he felt like an idiot for his exhaustion-muddled brain not picking up on their names when Nancy had announced them as Lynn Audrey and Lynn Pearl. Oh, great. I was worried that these idiots would come back because, like, yes, I want more character developed with them. I also hate Audrey with a passion and despise Pearl. So, damn it. They were not entirely strangers. He'd seen the girl twice before, both at Cinder's booth at the market, then again at the ball. This was Cinder's stepsister. And the woman. The woman. His blood curdled with the memory of her, made worse by the almost bashful, girlish look she was giving him now. He had seen her at the ball, too, when she'd been about to strike Cinder for daring to attend in the first place. "Your Majesty," said Nancy, returning behind them, "may I produce Lynn Audrey G. and her daughter, Lynn Pearl May." They bowed again. "Yes, hello, you are—" "I was the legal guardian of Lynn Cinder," Audrey said. "Please forgive the intrusion, Your Imperial Majesty. I understand you are quite busy." He cleared his throat, wishing now he'd left the collar alone. It was already strangling him. "Please, sit down," he said, gesturing to the sitting area around the holographic fire. "That will be all, Nancy. Thank you." Kai moved to claim the chair, determined not to sit beside either of the women. They, in turn, perched straight back on the sofa so as not to crumple the bows on their kimono-style dresses, and folded their hands demurely atop their laps. God, I hate these chicks. I do, because you know what? They're claiming that they have information. They're claiming that they have information on Cinder to help out with the fugitive thing. I'm not surprised. Oh, hold on. Hold the phone. Oh, fuck. Lin May had told Madame Benoit that fucking Audrey doesn't know everything about Cinder, but that means that she knows some things. Is this where Audrey reveals what little she knows? And maybe she uses it as a bargaining chip for Kai to marry Pearl, because they're in kimono dresses right now, and they're sitting with their hands demurely in their lap, because Audrey is still trying to set up something so she still has money coming in. I hate Audrey. She's just despicable at every given turn. She's always looking out for herself. Despise her. I really do. I absolutely just... Ugh. I just hate. The resemblance between the two was remarkable, and of course, nothing at all like Cinder, whose skin had always been sun-darkened, whose hair was straighter and finer, who had carried an understated confidence with her eyes even when she was shy and stammering. Kai caught himself before he could smile at the memory of Cinder, shy and stammering. I'm afraid we were not formally introduced when our paths crossed at the ball last week, Linji. Oh, your Imperial Majesty is too kind. Audrey, please. Truth be told, I am attempting to distance myself from the ward who now carries my husband's name, and you will, I am sure, remember my lovely daughter. She turned his attention to Pearl. Yes, we met at the market. You had some packages you wished Cinder to store for you. He was glad the girl flushed, and he hoped she was remembering how rude she'd been that day. We met at the ball, Your Majesty, said Pearl. We discussed my poor sister, my real sister, who recently fell ill and passed away from the same disease that claimed your illustrious father. Okay, alright, so a question that I had before was, Pearl said that she was going to tell Prince Kai everything about Cinder, that she was a cyborg and terrible. Obviously she didn't, and then the whole event from Cinder occurred. But I had wondered what they were talking about. Because Pearl knew better than to tell Prince Kai that Cinder was cyborg, because any relationship with cyborgs is ruined. Now confirmed, I had someone confirm it for me, but now confirmed through the book that they were talking about Pearl being dead. I mean, yes, it was confirmed in the moment because Kai was telling her, like, oh, if I had known that your sister died, which, yeah, but it was still kind of vague about what they talked about, so now it's more just like set in stone confirmed. Anyway. Yes, I recall. My condolences on your loss. He waited for the expected return of sympathy, but it did not come. The mother was too busy examining the office's lacquered woodwork. The daughter was too busy examining Kai with faux timidity. He tapped his fingers against the chair's arm. My android tells me you have information to impart regarding Lynn Cinder? Yes, Your Majesty. Audrey drew back her attention to him. Thank you for seeing us in such... Yes, Your Majesty. British. Hello. Thank you for seeing us on such short notice, but I do have some information that I think could be helpful in your search for my ward. As a concerned citizen, I of course want to do anything I can to assist with the search and ensure she is apprehended before she can do further damage. Of course you do, but forgive me, Linji. I was under the impression you'd already been contacted and questioned by the authorities as a part of the investigation. Oh yes, we spoke at length with some very nice men, said Audrey, but since then something new has come to my attention. Kai settled his elbows on his knees. Your Majesty, I trust you are familiar with the recorded footage from the quarantines about 2 weeks ago in which a girl attacked 2 medroids? He nodded. Of course, the girl who spoke to Chang Sunto, the boy who recovered from the plague. Well, at the time I was very distracted, having... sorry, this. Of course, the girl who spoke to Chang Sunto, the boy who recovered from the plague. Yes, well, at the time I was very distracted, having just lost my youngest daughter. But since then I've taken a closer look at the video, and I'm convinced that the girl is Cinder. Kai's brow drew together, already replaying the video in his mind. The girl was never clearly seen, the recording was grainy and shaky, and only showed glimpses of her back. Really? He mused, trying not to sound speculative. What makes you think that? It's difficult to tell on the video itself, and I would not know for sure, except I was having Cinder's ID tracked that day. As she'd been behaving suspiciously for some time. I know she was near the quarantines that day. Before, I thought she was merely attempting to run away from her household duties, but I now see that the little aberration had a much more sinister motive in mind. Oh, so she would say that with some disdain, so... But I now see that the little aberration had a much more sinister motive in mind. His eyebrows rose. Aberration? Audrey's cheeks tinted pink. Even that is too kind for her, Your Majesty. Are you aware that she can't even cry? Kai sat back. After a moment he found that, rather than being disgusted, as Audrey clearly expected, he was left merely curious. Really? Is that normal for cyborgs? I wouldn't know, Your Majesty. She is the first and hopefully the last cyborg I'll ever have the misfortune of knowing. I can't understand why we make cyborgs in the first place. They're dangerous and proud creatures, parading around all day like they think they're better than everyone else, like they deserve a special treatment for their eccentricities. They're nothing but a drain on our hard-working society. Collar beginning to itch, Kai cleared his throat. I see. You said something earlier about evidence that Cinder had been near the quarantines and done something sinister? Yes, Your Majesty. If you'd be so kind as to refer to my ID page, you'll see I've uploaded a video that is rather incriminating. Kai unlatched his port screen from his belt, thinking about the footage from the quarantines as he searched for Audrey's page. The video was at the top, low-quality image tagged with the symbol of the Commonwealth's law enforcement androids. What is this? When Cinder wouldn't respond to my comms that day, and I was sure she was fleeing the country, I enacted my right to have her forcibly retrieved. This is the footage from when they found her. I'm so sorry. I just have no respect for Audrey. I don't know why I instinctively go to look at myself, like to apologize to myself. I should be apologizing to you guys. I'm sorry I burped. It was gross. Please excuse me. Holding his breath, Kai played the video. It was shot from a hovercar, peering down on a dusty street surrounded by abandoned warehouses. And there was Cinder, panting and angry. She raised a clenched fist toward the android. I didn't steal it! It belongs to her family, not to you or anyone else! The camera shook as the hover landed and the android approached her. Scowling, Cinder took a half step back. I haven't done anything wrong! That Medroid was attacking me! It was self-defense! Kai watched, shoulders tense, as the android rambled on in its monotone voice about the rights of her legal guardian and the Cyborg Protection Act, until finally Cinder assented to come with them, and the video ended. It took a mere 4 seconds for Kai to pull up the footage of the girl attacking the quarantine medroid, and his grip tightened around the device as he fit the puzzle pieces together. He found himself feeling like a fool for the 100th time that week. It made sense that it was Cinder. Of course it was Cinder. He had given the antidote just hours before to Dr. Erland right in front of her. Erland must have passed it to her, and then she gave it to Cheng Sunto. And though the cameras had never got a good shot of her, the hasty ponytail and baggy cargo pants matched perfectly. Gulping, he shut the video off and retracted the port to his belt. What was she talking about that she didn't steal? What belongs to her family? Audrey set her mouth in a firm line, deep wrinkles cutting into her upper lip. Something that did indeed belong with her family, with those who would have given proper respect to the deceased, and Cinder mutilated that which was once most precious to me in order to get it. She what? She what? I believe she stole my daughter's ID chip, not minutes after her death. Audrey placed a hand on the swath of silk over her abdomen. It churns my stomach to think of, but I know I should have expected it. Cinder was always jealous of both my girls, and so spiteful. Although I could not have imagined her sinking to such a low before, now that I know her true nature, I cannot be surprised by it. She deserves to be found and punished for what she's done. Kai drew away from the venom in her tone, and couldn't connect her accusations to his own memories of Cinder. He thought of their paths crossing in the elevator, of her eyes filling with sadness as she spoke of her dying sister, how she'd asked if Kai would save a dance for her in case she miraculously survived. Or was every memory he had of Cinder truly nothing more than a lunar trick? What did he know about her, truly? Are you sure? The reports claimed that the weapon used against the androids was a scalpel, and it just so happened that moments before I received a call telling me that my daughter... my daughter... Her jaw trembled, her knuckles whitening in her lap. And I can just see her trying to take Peony's identity in that inhuman head of hers, she grimaced. It chills me to think, but it's precisely something she would have done. And you think she could still have the ID chip with her? Oh, fuck. Can they track it if it's not in a person? No, because they would only be able to track like where it's scanned and shit. That, Your Majesty, I cannot say, but it is a possibility. With a nod, Kai stood. Audrey and Pearl gawked up at him, mute, before bolting to their own feet. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Linji. I'll have a tracker set up for the ID immediately. If she has the chip, we will find her. Even as he spoke, he found himself pleading to the stars that Lynn Audrey was wrong, that Cinder had not taken the ID chip, but that was a stupid wish, an immature wish. He had to find her, and he had only one more day to do it. He had no desire to find out what Lavana would do if he failed. Sorry. Thank you, Your Majesty, said Audrey. I only want to know that my daughter's memory won't be tarnished, because I was once so generous as to allow that awful girl into my family. Thank you, he started, not sure what he was thanking her for, but it seemed the right thing to say. If we have any further questions, I'll have someone contact you. Yes, of course, Your Majesty. I only wish to do well by my country and see this horrid girl brought to justice. He lifted his head. You do realize that once she's found, Queen Lavana intends to have her executed, don't you? Audrey folded her hands prettily before her. I'm sure the law is there for a reason, Your Majesty. Pursing her lips, Kai stepped away from the sitting area and led them toward the door. After 2 more bows apiece, Pearl glided out of the room with lashes fluttering at Kai until her neck could no longer crane toward him. But Audrey paused in the doorway, bowed one more time. It was such an honor, Your Majesty. He smiled tautly back. I do wonder, not that it matters one little bit, but only as a matter of curiosity. I hate Audrey. I fucking hate Audrey. I hate Audrey. I haven't even read the fucking... Oh, hold on. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. I don't want to fucking... I hate Audrey. I hate her so fucking much. I can't even... and I have to read this out loud. I'm upset. I have to read this. Ah! I do wonder.
Not that this matters one little bit, but only as a matter of curiosity. Should this lead to any discoveries in the investigation, might I be able to expect any sort of reward for my assistance?
I hate Audrey. I hate Audrey so fucking. Oh my god, I fucking hate Audrey. I hate Audrey. I hate her. 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 I fucking hate this bitch. I do. Oh, she's always on the lookout for herself. She's always. She had no fucking. I can't. There's not a single redeemable quality. Not a single fucking redeemable quality. Sort of. I hate Audrey. I hate her. I hate her so fucking much. 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 Oh, this book is so good. Oh, I hate this book so fucking much. I hate this book. I love this book so much. I hate it because this book takes you on a roller coaster of fucking emotions. You're never safe. You're never. If you think for a moment that you're safe, you're not fucking safe. Listen, 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 listen. You're not fucking safe. I'm upset. I'm upset. I need fuck Capri Sun. As you can tell, the artificial light's now on. Spent my whole day reading. Not regretting it. Love it a lot. Just upset. The thing that Audrey said at the end of the last chapter really bugged me. Because she just... No redeemable qualities, that woman. Would you get the hell out of here? Damn light. I can put my hand on like this and it fucks up. Anyway. Chapter 29. Scarlett's prison cell had begun life as a dressing room. The vague outlines of mirrors and vanities were burned into the walls, and the strips of light bulbs that had surrounded them had been reduced to empty sockets. The carpet had been pulled up, revealing cold stone beneath, and the solid oak door had been taken off its hinges and left abandoned in the corner, replaced instead with welded iron bars and an ID-sensitive lock. Scarlett's fury had kept her pacing and storming about the room, kicking the walls and growling at the bars, for all night and most of the day. At least it seemed like nearly a full day had passed. It seemed like months had passed. But being trapped in the Opera House's sublevel meant she had no indication of time other than the 2 meals that had been brought to her. The soldier who made the delivery said nothing when she asked how long they were going to keep her there, or demanded to see her grandmother immediately, only smirked at her through the bars in a way that made her skin crawl. She finally collapsed on the blanketless mattress, physically exhausted. She glared at the ceiling, hating herself, hating these men that kept her prisoner. Hating Wolf. She gnashed her teeth and dug her fingernails into the worn, broken mattress. Alpha Kesley. If she ever saw him again, she would scratch his eyes out. She would throttle him until his lips turned blue. She would... Finally wore yourself out? No, finally wore yourself out? I don't know what kind of voice he would have. He's a wolf. He's an alpha. Finally wore yourself out. Why is he southern? Whatever. She jerked upward. One of the men who had first brought her to the cell stood on the other side. Rafe or Troya. She didn't know which. I'm not hungry, she spat. He sneered. Every last one of them seemed to carry that same humorless smile, like it had been bred into them. I'm not offering food, he said, and swiped his wrist past the scanner. Grasping the bars, he lugged the door open. I'm taking you to see your precious grandmere. Scarlet scrambled off the mattress, all exhaustion flooding away. Really? Those are my orders. Am I going to have to bind you, or do you intend to come willingly? Now I'm making him sound just like Wolf if I don't put the accent in there. Whatever. I'll come. Just take me to her. His gaze dipped over her, evidently determining that she didn't pose a threat. He stepped back and gestured toward the long, dim corridor.
Then after you...
Nah, what the hell?
Then after you...
I gotta, get into character. As soon as she stepped into the hallway, he grasped her wrist and lowered his face so that his breath steamed against her neck.
Do anything funny, and I'll take my displeasure out on the old hag. Do you understand?
She shuddered. Wait, yeah, cut that out. She shuddered. Without waiting for a response, he released her and nudged her between her shoulder blades, prodding her down the hallway. Her heart raced. She was near delirium with fatigue and the promise of seeing her grandmother, but it hadn't kept her from scoping out her prison. Half a dozen barred doorways lined the basement corridor, all dark. The man urged her around a corner, up a thin stairwell, through a doorway. They were backstage, dusty old props filled with rafters and black curtains hung like phantoms in the darkness. The only light came from runners along the aisles in the audience, and Scarlet had to squint as the soldier led her out onto the stage. Then down the steps into the empty audience. An entire section of seats had been removed, leaving holes where they had once been bolted to the sloped floor. So they're describing the Opera House. What was the last thing that the Opera House had showed before it was demolished? Was it cats? That was a cheap jab. Slope floor. Another group of soldiers was standing there in the shadows, like they'd been having a jovial conversation before Scarlet and her captor had interrupted them. Scarlet kept her eyes firmly glued to the end of the table. She didn't think any of them were Wolf, but she didn't want to know if she was wrong. They reached the back of the theater. Scarlet pushed open one of the huge doors. They were on a balcony overlooking the lobby and the grand staircase. Still no sunlight came through the hole in the ceiling. Clearly, she had missed the whole day. Her captor grabbed her elbow, pulling her away from the stairs, past more haunting statues of cherubs and angels. I almost said angles. She yanked her arm from his grip and tried to commit their journey to memory, creating a blueprint of the opera house in her mind. But it was difficult when she knew that she was going to see her grandmother. Finally. The thought of being held by these monsters for nearly 3 long weeks curdled her stomach. Forgive me. He guided her up a staircase to the first balcony and continued to the second. Closed doors led back into the theater, to the higher tier of seats. But the soldier bypassed them and moved to another hallway. Finally, he stopped before a closed door, grasped the handle, and shoved it open. They had reached one of the private balconies that overlooked the stage, holding only 4 velvet chairs in 2 rows. Her grandma was sitting alone in the front row, her thick gray braid dangling over the back of the seat. The tears Scarlet had been fighting for so long came to her in a rush.
Grandmere!
Yeah. Her grandma started, but hang on, I gotta sneeze. But you can't sneeze at these impressions. Her grandma started, but her Scarlet was already bailing toward her. She collapsed to her knees in the space between the chairs and the railing and draped herself over her grandma's lap, crying into her jeans. You see? The same dirt-covered jeans she'd always gardened in. The familiar aroma of dirt and hay peeled up from the fabric, making Scarlet cry harder. "Scarlet, what are you doing here?" her grandma asked, setting her hands down on Scarlet's back. She sounded stern and angry, but not unkind. "Stop that! You're making a fool of yourself." She pulled Scarlet off her lap. There, calm down. What are you doing here?" Scarlet sat back on her heels and stared bleary-eyed into her grandma's face. Bloodshot eyes bellied her exhaustion, no matter how her jaw was set. She was on the verge of crying too, but hadn't yet succumbed to the tears. Scarlet took her hands, squeezing them. Her grandma's hands were soft, as if 3 weeks away from the farm had rubbed away years of calluses. I came for you, she said. After Dad told me what happened, what they were doing to you. I had to come find you. Are you alright? Are you hurt? I'm fine. She rubbed her thumbs over Scarlet's knuckles. But I don't like seeing you here. You shouldn't have come. These men, you shouldn't be here. It's dangerous. I'm going to get us both out of here. I promise. Stars, I've missed you so much. Ah! Sobbing, she pressed her forehead to their entwined fingers, ignoring the hot tears that dripped off her jaw. I found you, Grandmere. I found you. Slipping one hand out of Scarlet's grip, her grandma brushed a cluster of messy curls off Scarlet's brow. I knew you would. I knew you would come. Here, sit down next to me. Stifling the tears, Scarlet hurled herself off her grandma's lap. A tray sat on the seat beside her grandma, holding a cup of tea, half a baguette, and a bowl of red grapes that seemed untouched. Her grandma took the tray and held it out to the soldier in the doorway. His lips curled, but he took the tray and left, letting the door shut behind him. Scarlet's heart expanded. She did not hear a lock being put on the door. They were alone. Oh, so I turned the microphone back on. Sit here, Scarlet. I've missed you so much. Oh, but I'm so angry with you. You shouldn't have come. It's dangerous, but now that you're here, oh, darling, you're exhausted.
Grandmia, don't they monitor you? Aren't they afraid you'll escape?
They're both French. The old woman's face softened, and she pet the empty seat. Of course they monitor me. We are never truly alone here. Bad impression. Scarlet considered the wall that separated them from the next private balcony, covered in flaking red wallpaper. Perhaps someone was there now, listening to them. Or the group of soldiers she'd seen down in the first floor audience. If their senses were nearly as attuned as Wolf's, they could probably hear them even from down there. Ignoring the urge to scream obscenities across the void, she lifted herself into the chair and reached for her grandma's hands again, holding them tight. Soft as they may have become, they were also deathly cold.
You're sure you're all right? They haven't hurt you?
Her grandma smiled wearily. They haven't hurt me, not yet. Although I don't know what they have planned, and I don't trust them a hair, not after what they did to Luke. And they've mentioned you. I was terrified they would go after you too, darling. I wish you hadn't come. I should have been more prepared for this. I should have known this would happen.
But what do they want?
Her grandma dragged her attention down to the dark stage.
They want information that I can't give them. Though I would in a heartbeat if I could. I would have weeks ago. Anything to come home to you. Anything to keep you safe. Information about what?
Her grandma took in a slow breath.
They want to know about Princess Celine.
Scarlet's pulse skipped.
It's true then? Do you know something about her?
Her grandma's eyebrows jumped upwards. Have they told you why then? Why they suspect me? She nodded, feeling guilty for knowing the secret her grandma had so long harbored.
They told...
Heard something.
They told me about Logan Trainer. How they think he brought Celine to Earth, and how he may have sought out your help. They told me they think he's my grandfather.
The wrinkles on Grandma's forehead deepened, and she cast a concerned look at the wall behind Scarlet, toward the elder balcony, before drawing her attention back.
Scarlet, my love.
Her expression was gentle, but she didn't continue. Scarlet gulped, wondering if, after all these years, her grandma couldn't stand to dig up the past, the romance that had been so brief but had been clinging to her for so long. Did she even know that Logan Tanner was dead? I said Trainer, I'm sorry, it's Tanner.
Grandmia, I remembered the man that came to the house. The man from the Eastern Commonwealth.
Her grandma tilted her head up, patient.
I thought he was going to take me away, but he wasn't, was he? You two are talking about the princess. Very good, Scarlet, dear. Why don't you tell them his name? You must remember what it was, and then they could go get him. Won't he know where the princess is?
They no longer want to know about the princess. She bit down on her lip. Frustration welled up inside her. She was shaking.
Then why don't they let us go?
Her grandma squeezed Scarlet's fingers. Years of pulling weeds and chopping vegetables had made them strong, despite their age.
They can't control me, Scarlet.
They can't control me, Scarlet. Does she have a chip? Because she was in contact with Lin May, the dude that came up with the fucking... goddamn. The chip, the thing that's inside Cinder that stops the lunar control. What if he put one inside Madame Benoit to help to keep the secret? Ah! So maybe he didn't always intend for Cinder to have it. Maybe he made it for her. That way, maybe Lin May made the chip for Madame Benoit, so that she couldn't be controlled or mind read or whatever by the thaumaturges, or by any lunars. That way, it keeps Scarlett's identity secret. I don't know, but she probably has one in her face, which is attached to her spine, which is where the chip is. Anyway. She scrutinized her grandma's lined face. What do you mean?
They're lunar. The thaumaturge, he has the lunar gift, but it doesn't work on me. That's why they're keeping me here. They want to know why.
Scarlet grasped for figments in her mind, all those bits and places she'd learned about lunars. Impossible to ever tell which were true and which were exaggerated tales. It was believed that their queen ruled through mind control, and that her thaumaturges were almost as strong as she was. That they could manipulate people's thoughts and emotions. That they could even control people's bodies if they so choose, like puppets on strings. Scarlet gulped.
Are there a lot of people who can't be controlled? Very few. Some lunars are born that way. They call them shells, but they've never known of an earthen who could resist them before. I'm the first. How is it? How? Is it genetic?
She hesitated.
Can I be controlled? Oh yes, dear. Whatever makes me like this, you do not have it. They'll use it against us, mark my words. I imagine they'll want to experiment on both of us as they attempt to find out where this abnormality comes from. Whether or not they should be worried about other earthens being able to resist them as well.
In the darkness, her grandma's jaw hardened.
It must not be hereditary. Your father was weak also.
Scarlet was lost in warm brown eyes that had always been soothing, and yet struck her as harsh now in the darkness of the theater. Something gnawed at the back of her thoughts, the faintest suspicion. Her father was weak. Weak for women, weak for booze, a weak father, a weak man. But her grandmother had never suggested she could think the same of Scarlet. You'll be fine, she always said, after a skinned knee, after a broken arm, after her first youthful heartbreak. You'll be fine because you're strong, like me. Heart thumping, Scarlet lowered her... Why the fuck did they feel like they needed to explain that? So is... So there's a disconnect between Madame Benoit, Papa Luke, Mr. Moon Daddy, and Scarlet. Maybe Scarlet... Maybe Luke isn't Scarlet's Moon Daddy? Who knows? Heart thumping, Scarlet lowered her gaze to the intertwined fingers. Her grandmother's very wrinkled, very frail, very soft hands. Her chest constricted. Lunars could manipulate people's thoughts and emotions, manipulate the way they experienced the very world around them. Gulping, Scarlet pulled away. Grandma's fingers clenched in a brief effort to restrict her, but then let go. Scarlet staggered out of her seat and backed against the rail, staring at her grandmother. The familiar unkempt hair in its always crooked braid. The familiar eyes, growing colder as they peered up at her, growing wider. She blinked rapidly against the hallucination, and her grandmother's hands grew larger. Repulsion ripped through Scarlet. She gripped the railing to hold herself steady. The door at the back of the balcony opened, but instead of her guards, Scarlet saw the thaumaturge's silhouette in the hallway. Very well, Omega. We have learned as much as we can from her. Scarlet faced her grandmother again. A startled cry was wrenching out of... A startled cry was wrenched out of her. Her grandmother was gone, replaced by Wolf's brother, Omega Ron Kesley. Sat staring up at her, perfectly at ease. He wore the same shirt she'd seen him in last, wrinkled and flecked with dry mud. Hello, dear. How nice to see you again. Scarlet glared at the thaumaturge. She could make out the whites of his eyes, the draping of his fancy tunic. Where is she? She's alive for now, and unfortunately remains a mystery. He squinted at Scarlet. Her mind remains impenetrable, but whatever her secret is, she has not passed it on to her son or her grandchild. I would think of it as a mental trick she was using. She would at least have tried to teach it to you, if not that pathetic drunkard. And yet, if it is genetic, could it be a random trait, or is there a shell in your ancestry? He touched a finger to his lips, analyzing Scarlet like a frog he was about to dissect. Perhaps you won't be entirely useless, though. I wonder how lubricated the old lady's tongue will become if she were to watch us as you hammered needles into your own flesh. What's up, Tipper? My dog's right here. Fury clawed up her throat, and Scarlet hurled herself at him with a ragged cry, nails scratching at his face. She froze with her fingertips millimeters from his eye sockets. The fury drained away all at once as she collapsed, sobbing uncontrollably on the floor, wondering what was wrong with her. She reached for her hatred again, but it continuously slipped from her mind, like trying to hold onto an eel. The harder she tried, the faster and harder the tears came, choking her, blinding her, all her anger dissolving into hopelessness and misery. Her head filled with self-loathing. She was useless, weak, insignificant, and stupid. That's not how it was written, but my dyslexia made me read it that way, so let me try it again. She was useless, weak, and stupid, and insignificant. She folded in on herself, her cries nearly drowning out the thaumaturge's unimpressed chuckle above her. How unfortunate your grandmother hasn't been so easy to manipulate. It would make all this so much simpler. Her mind hushed, the destructive words slipping back to a far quiet corner of her thoughts, and the tears faded away from them, like turning a faucet on and off, like toying with a puppet. Scarlet lay crumpled on the floor, gasping. She swiped the mucus from her face. Digging her hands into the carpet, she forced her body to stop trembling and pushed herself up, using the door jamb for support. The thaumaturge's face twisted in that sickeningly charming way he had. I'll have you escorted back to your quarters, he said, his tone all syrupy kindness. Thank you most humbly for your cooperation. Okay, alright, hold up, I gotta... Yeah, okay, alright. So the thaumaturges can control the wolves and use them as extensions of their own will. And this thaumaturge, Jael, however you pronounce his name, is so powerful, he tricked Scarlet into thinking that she saw her grandmother and was revealing secrets and trying to comfort her and trying to coerce her. And that's why that line stuck out. Why was she saying that her dad was weak, but that she was strong? Maybe to help just entice more lunar trickery. But her grandma actually is not able to be controlled, so she must have the cybernetic thing that Lin May made and gave one to Cinder. But the fact that they did it so vividly, they described everything from the scent of the farm on her pants, the wrinkles in her hands, those sad brown eyes, or whatever color the eyes were. All of it. Every detail was exactly how Scarlet remembered it. It's frightening that the thaumaturges and the lunars have that much power.